Hey, this is Tarence Lauchié, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this podcast, The Growth Exchange. This podcast was designed to curate conversation, dialogue, and monologue around all things growth. I believe that everything living has the potential to grow into its fullest and most maximal potential. So let's grow. Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Growth Exchange Podcast. I'm Dr. Tarence Lauchié. Glad that you decided to tune in if you're listening on social media, perhaps through one of the performing platforms. I'd like for you to like and share this and let other people know about this podcast. It has been around for a few months now. Got a great dynamic team that has been helping me to put together content all things growth, just dealing with the concepts of what it takes to grow. I've had some wonderful dialogue so far. I think maybe 6, 7 episodes out. And if you haven't checked it out, you might want to do that. But today, as you can see, I'm kind of flying solo, and that's intentional. I want to talk about a subject that is dear to my heart, but it also, I believe, helps to define who we are at the Growth Exchange podcast. A podcast, of course, could be a one-time event. It could be something that people casually or casually listens to or decides to play while they're doing something. I really endeavor to make this podcast a viable source and resource for individuals who want to see change in their lives, want to see progress, want to see growth and maximum potential being actualized. At the onset of rolling this podcast out, I gave the description that this podcast was designed to help people to embrace the challenges, but then also to overcome those challenges and barriers to growth, to become everything that God intended for them to be. I believe that that's the true definition of a maximized life, and that is becoming everything that you were created to be. And we do that through the ideas of growth. I'm going to share some stuff that will be valuable to you today. So you might want to take some notes or pause for a moment. What does growth really mean? What does it mean for us to embrace a concept, idea, or maybe a mindset around growth? I'm of the persuasion that growth has to happen intentionally. It's not inevitable. There are things that are alive for a period of time and they no longer grow, and then ultimately they no longer exist. What if our dreams are in that category? What if our objectives and our goals happen to slide off of our growth scale into just barely getting by, or maybe even living off of borrowed time? Now, that might be philosophical, but for the next few moments, I want to talk about what it really means to grow. We should be able to see signs of growth in everything that we do. In fact, our decisions, like the decisions you're making today, whether you're listening to this in the morning about to start your day or at the end of a day and you're thinking about tomorrow, there should be some intentionality around the idea or the concept of what it means to grow. When we make the decision to grow, there are some efforts that go into place. There are some actual practices that we need to put into motion. And those practices are practices that have worked in the past, but they may also be new innovations to do things differently or to do things in a better way than what we've done before. So that means that growth and change are symbiotic. They are tied together. When we embrace a growth mindset, or at least tap into it, it does become a little bit uncomfortable. And we do find ourselves oftentimes in territory that we've never charted before. And so the uncharted territory could bring about a lot of different emotions, anxiety, perhaps fear, maybe even sometimes a sense of passivity because we're used to being carried by the currents of life, and that is change. But what if we navigated the change? What if we decided that we wanted to implement change in our lives in a way that produces growth, an outcome that makes things better than what they were? Well, it does require some overcoming of barriers. Let's think about some of those barriers. When I started out in undergrad at Michigan State University, I had overcome some very unsurmountable odds. Having been homeless, coming from abstract poverty, quite a few challenges, social challenges, as well as economic challenges and family challenges. But I was I was destined to embark upon an education. It took me a lot longer than what I thought to complete an undergraduate degree, but at least I had overcome the barrier of failure, the barrier of poverty holding or gripping me to repeat the same cycles that I had seen around me for 17 years. I was a 17-year-old, decided, hey, I want to go to a university. I want to be able to make something of myself and perhaps get a degree and go on to be a newscaster or some talk show host. I definitely knew that it had something to do with the microphone, but there were so many insurmountable odds that worked against me, and most of them were psychological and emotional. But in overcoming those, it was based on me finding a rooted, grounded sense of faith, and that faith happened to be in God. I share that as a testimony because it was the first time that I recognized that there was a need to overcome a barrier that embraced change as opposed to just let life happen. Now, I could have decided to become a statistic even after the first semester, going back home to the east side of Detroit and trying to readjust, just didn't fit anymore. So really what I'm saying is that once you've expanded your mind and you have a growth mindset and make a determined effort to do something different, you can't go back to the way things were. I want to inspire somebody, even in this conversation or this monologue, to think about the fact that in order to get something that you have never had, you have to do something that you've never done. And you have to be willing to bear under the pressure of the unknown and perhaps even take risks and become vulnerable to the unknown. One of the things I found to be very helpful in overcoming barriers to growth would be, one, to observe, watch, kind of check things out. But then also, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask someone who's doing what it is that you want to do, how do you do that? Reading and resources. Now with the internet and the World Wide Web, you can become an expert right from your home with AI. A funny story, I was singing the Old MacDonald song with one of my grandchildren, and I could have sworn instead of saying E-I-E-I-O, they said A-I-A-I-O. And that's because this generation uses AI very quickly, very easily, and without any second thoughts. I encourage you to investigate perhaps using some of the resources that have already been set up for us to succeed in expanding our knowledge. That's overcoming a barrier. Being able to use the resources that are at your disposal in order to learn something, to do something that you've never done. You know, the barriers that were also very prevalent would be the barrier of self-esteem or the lack of self-esteem. Sometimes the way that we feel about ourselves is the determining factor of whether or not we decide to go on and do something or not. Many times people's perception of us, their ideas of us, transfer into our perception or our ideas of ourselves. Perhaps you've had experiences in your life where you might have been called dumb, or you might have said you were stupid, or you'll never make it, or you won't succeed. And those negative words landed somewhere. They landed in your heart or in your head. Well, one of the things to do in overcoming the barrier of other people's opinion of you or perspective of you is to gain a new perspective or an opinion of yourself. I don't even suggest that you're able to divorce yourself from other people's perspective, depending on how long they've been speaking into your life. It could be a parent, a grandparent, or an influential person. I remember having a speech teacher give me a sidewinded insult and compliment at the same time. It was a debate class. We had speech, debate, and forensics, and we were preparing for a presentation, and a friend of mine and I, we were just clowning. We were acting up. It's high school. We were 11th grade, and we were being interruptive, I guess, because she was trying to say something from her desk at the front of the room, and we were having our own conversation and laugh fest in the back. And she came over to where we were. I'll never forget it. And she said, "You are a great speaker, but you are being so asinine." And I didn't know what asinine meant. I thought about it all the way home. I thought about it for the next couple of days. And then I thought, well, why don't you just go look it up? Go and check out what asinine is. And the definition of the word did not register to me as something that I wanted to be. It did not register as an ambitious state of being. It actually hit me as an insult, but she had a compliment in the front of it. She said, "You're an excellent orator, but right now you're being asinine." And so because I learned the meaning of that word, I decided that I was going to scratch that from the compliment and embrace the excellent orator. And it built my confidence to know that she would think that I was a good speaker or that I had the ability to orate, but the asinine activity was something that I can control. Which means that instead of ignoring the instructor, instead of being disruptive in class, instead of being obstinate against her wishes for the environment that she was trying to create, I could comply, long enough to build and to enhance the compliment that somebody in authority or somebody of influence spoke about me. So I started to embrace what it means to be an excellent orator, what it means to speak clearly, to use diction, and to also broaden a vocabulary that will give me the opportunity to communicate where others may find it difficult. So I was able to take something that was a challenge that could have psychologically been stuck in my mind. I could have been, willing to embrace being asinine and just spend the rest of my life in that state. But instead, I overcame that barrier, or decided to overcome that barrier, by one, finding out what it meant, and then making the decision of whether or not I wanted that to be attached to my life. As we continue through this conversation, I can think of so many other resources that are available to us when it comes to bettering our abilities or our own esteem. One of the things that I find myself doing is doing some self-talk that overrides any negative thoughts. And that self-talk, of course, is still steeped in my faith, and I use confessions or declarations that are rooted in Scripture. The declarations that talk about the fact that we were fearfully and wonderfully made, or even the fact that God created us with a good work inside of us of which He's able to complete. When I speak those words, it builds self-esteem and it creates a momentum that helps me to overcome barriers. But it also gives me the opportunity to exercise my faith. We all have faith in something. Even the person who says that they are an agnostic or an atheist, they believe and choose not to believe what is potentially something that you can believe. So we have a muscle that is often utilized by default, and that is the belief in something. I strongly suggest that in order to live a maximized life, in order to tap into a growth mindset, you have to believe in the fact that it's possible. You have to believe that you can. You have to believe that what you have is enough. All that I have is all that I need. I heard one orator say, I borrowed from that. We borrow often from each other. And I know that all I have is all I need to get everything that's coming to me. You say, well, what do you know? How do you know what's coming to you? Well, you have to pursue potential. I'm going to take a break in just a minute, but before we do, I'd like to lay a couple of more tracks. You know, we've laid down the track of what it means to grow, but it also gave us an opportunity to take a look at some of the barriers to growth. I want to talk about the signs of growth in more detail, but then also when we come back, I want to talk about how there are two types of people that exist. There are those who are just living, and then there are those who are fighting to survive. There are those who are just living and those who are fighting to survive. And so we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll continue to walk this walk, and help to understand what it means to grow. We'll be right back. If you're a business or a nonprofit looking to tell your story through powerful video, you've got to check out 630 Visions. They specialize in creating high-quality cinematic content that not only looks amazing, but actually helps you grow your brand and connect with your audience. I've seen their work. It's purposeful, professional, and built around your vision. Visit 630visions.com, that's 630visions.com, to learn more and to see how they can help bring your story to life. Hey, welcome back to the Growth Exchange. I'm Dr. Tarence Lauchié. I hope you are listening to this inspiration as relates to living the maximized life, tapping into a growth mindset. I was kind of testimonial prior to the break, but I want to get a little bit more practical in this conversation about growth. I want to challenge you on your thinking as it relates to the signs of growth, How do you know when you're growing? What are the indicators? Of course, often we will attribute increase with growth, more with growth. And that's not always the case, because let's say that you're having a hard time and you're having more of a hard time. That doesn't mean that you're growing. It means that you just have more. Sometimes people will say, oh, well, I'm getting money as a result of my work, or my business is doing well. But if you're not doing business well, no matter how well it seems, eventually it'll become the law of diminishing returns, which means that if you're providing a poor service and you're getting paid for it, you'll provide more poor service and eventually you'll pay for it. And so when you think about how growth happens, growth inevitably introduces us to opportunities to change and to do something different than what it is that we've been doing. So the patterns or the cycles of repetitive behavior are good. If it's working, don't break it or don't fix it. But at times we become challenged by a stagnation of doing the same thing, which leads me to the idea of two types of people. Some people are just living, meaning that they are doing okay and everything is fine and good enough is good enough. And for them, paying the bills, living out their generation is enough. But then there are others who are fighting to survive even beyond themselves. And so I'll divide those two and help you to decide, or give you the opportunity to decide which one you want to be considered as a person who is just living, meaning that we grow up learning how to just survive and make it to another day, regardless of our backgrounds. We develop kind of a basic instinct on how to live every single day through patterns and repetition. But as we fast forward to being adults, we learn that a life that is just simply lived with no dimension, with no unique traits, characteristics, accomplishments, change, excitement, even disruption, those lives breed a different outcome than the ones who are just steady as we go without any shifts or changes. What am I advocating? I'm talking about the fact that sometimes you have to shake it up. You have to do something different in order to get something different. And when we look at tapping into a growth mindset, we don't run away from disruption. We lean into disruption. I'm reminded of COVID, the period that we call the COVID era. 5 years ago, we endured one of the most catastrophic things that humanity has ever faced, right up there with the Black Plague, or right up there with various other pandemics, and we survived. But in the survival, we didn't just continue to exist. We learned some things, and we picked up strategies, and we learned techniques, innovations that helped us to learn how to do things more efficiently or even more effectively because of the restrictions that we had or the limitations that COVID had to offer. So what I'm proposing is that oftentimes when something comes to you negative and it appears as if it's trying to take you out, you can lean into that thing and learn from it. What if I did not have transportation? How would I manage? Or what if I did not have the resources that I have right now? Perhaps I would learn innovation in order to kick it up a notch or two in order to become better and more effective at what it is that I do. So for the entrepreneur, it may be developing a new line of product. It could be innovating on a line that you already have. But for somebody who is, let's say, a student trying to learn, and you're finding yourself in the cycle of defeat, while C's get degrees, you want to probably put effort in a different mode in order to successfully graduate or complete what it is that you're attempting to accomplish. I've had some of those challenges myself. In the fighting to survive mode, though, you become a little bit more aggressive. So instead of just living, just learning how to get through to the next thing and appreciating the survival mechanism in hindsight, we could be proactive and we could literally stand up and fight. You can literally take those same survival mechanisms and crank them up 1,000 and stand out among your peers. Or not only overcome one or two of the barriers that's in your way, but decide that you're going to annihilate all of them. Decide that you are going to move beyond just the basics of shelter and safety and security and sanity and move towards success. Now, success is a big word for those who don't have much of it, but success is commonplace for those who strive every day to do better than what they did the day before. And I strongly suggest that in this growth mindset. The growth mindset says that it continues to get better every single day. It's not just today things are good and hopefully they'll be good tomorrow. And if I do the same thing that I did today, I'll get what I got today tomorrow. And that's not absolutely true, because there's always a tomorrow, and what you're doing today may or may not suffice for tomorrow. Fighting to survive implies two things: action and effort. Fighting requires action and effort. Sometimes people fight out of a defensive mode, which is a reaction, but then others fight as in goal set, strive toward, pursue in order to overcome, but then also to accomplish. Fighting to survive is something that I was familiar with a few years back. I had an experience in my life back in 2008 when I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma, and I was given a limited amount of time to live. I was literally issued a death sentence from lymphoma, which is a blood cancer. Well, through the desire to fight, along with the miracle of medicine and my faith in God, I'm here today, 17 years later, to talk about what God has done, but also to stand victorious, cancer free, without any ramifications of that ever happened to me. That's a miracle. But the miracle involved my actions as well as my ability and desire to fight to survive. I would tell myself, instead of having chemotherapy treatments, I was going for my healing session. And I would program my thinking and listen to some music and some motivation through scripture and other things to build up my stamina in the fight. No matter how physically bad or wore out I felt, I had something deep inside, and that's a maximize or a growth mindset, because the promises that I had received from God included things that had not even occurred in the future yet. And now that I'm in the future, I look back and go, wow, God is really good on his promises, and he puts within us the ability to fight, to survive. Out of that, I arrived at a place in which I call the 2.0 principle. Good friend of mine would encourage me throughout that whole process, and he would send a text and he'd say, hey, how is Tarence 2.0 doing, or TL 2.0? And the 2.0 philosophy is really an upgraded version. Now, with software applications, I'm not really tech savvy, but I do understand that new versions of a software application will come out and you'll have to upgrade that. You'll literally have to do the update on that software app. Well, that is really what it is required for us to fight, to survive, to move beyond the thing that would have stopped us or blocked us or even killed us. We have to embrace or download the 2.0 application or the 2.0 version of ourselves. And it became a thing for me to use the terminology that I'm Tarence 2.0, which means that I'm a better version after having experienced what I went through than I was before. Which means it was an upgrade, which means it was an update of my software. I would even venture to say that the hardware changed because of me embracing the 2.0 mentality. God triggered this maximized life mentality in me, and I began to embrace the idea of becoming better every day, doing a little every day to become better than I was the day before. Now, I couldn't do that without, of course, the omniscience of God, but also without putting forth some effort to do that. Still working at it, still arriving at it 17 years later, still amping up the 2.0 mentality every single day. And that maximum potential that I tapped into and identified comes from an ancient text or a scripture that says, Jesus came that we might have life and that we might have it more abundantly or to the fullest. Fullest means maximum. And so I've embraced that mindset, and using the 2.0 principle, I look at things now from the perspective of how can it be made better. Think for a moment about how when we are adamant about achieving a goal, or when we set our minds to doing something, chances are we succeed. Chances are we make the decision, we do whatever is necessary, and we go for it. But the question is, are you willing to stay in the fight long enough to develop the stamina and the resilience that it takes to live at the improved level? You see, the 2.0 that I became 17 years ago has to be multiplied now. So it's not 34.0, but it's 2.0 every day. Every day it's improvement upon the day before. That's growth. Willing to embrace change, willing to overcome barriers, developing strategies, asking questions, learning things that I've never known before. I often tell people that we only know what we know. And if we only know what we know, then we don't know what we don't know. I'll let you unpack that. If we go with just what we know, what happens is that we become limited to just that exposure. But if we ensue or go after what we don't know, we now have given ourselves the opportunity to increase in knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and more than anything, application. I'm a firm believer that unless you apply what it is that you know, you don't even know that you know it. And then once you apply that, you will find that it's either flawed in some way or dated, meaning that I knew how to do these things when I was a kid, but now that I'm an adult, I need to know how to do them better. I knew how to do these things when I was single. Now that I'm married, I need to know how to do those things with more than one person in mind. So when we think about how our personal growth and how our personal development hinges upon our ability to move beyond just simply living to fighting to survive, we have to condition ourselves. We have to condition ourselves, and we have to categorically think of ways in order to become the navigators of our own growth, the navigators of our own development, our change, and ultimately our success. So that's what the Growth Exchange podcast is all about. That's what really drives every one of the interviews, all of the conversations, whether it's a dialogue or a monologue. The goal and the endeavor is to move people toward growth and change. So thanks for tuning in. This is Dr. Tarence Lauchié with the Growth Exchange podcast. Let's grow. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Growth Exchange. I'm Dr. Tarence Lauchié. It's been a pleasure to have these conversations and dialogues with our guests. If you notice, one thing we all share in common, and that is the ability, the desire, and the potential to grow and maximize our fullest potential. So keep tuning in. Share this with somebody, like it, maybe even invite somebody. And if you'd like to be a guest, contact us with the information that's here and available for you. Let's grow.